Yeah, so I have my office painted as an American flag. So I got a blue wall behind me or in front of me, and then on the side I've got red and white stripes, and then I have the Constitution and Bill of Rights hanging up.
Tailored WealthSaver podcast is here to bring you tailored stories that will educate and inspire you on how to enjoy life, grow wealth, and become a wealth saver.
We're your hosts, Q and Adrian. I'm an investment professional with an MBA in finance.
And I'm Adrian, a financial counselor, and I help my clients establish and reach their wealth saver financial goals. One of the fears Thais and I had when we purchased our first home was that we would have unfriendly or stuck-up neighbors. Thankfully, we have the opposite. Insert us meeting our neighbor and guest for today, Karl McGarvey, and his astounding wife, Kara, through their weekly Sunday Fun Day extravaganzas. So a little bit about Karl, or Major McGarvey, if I'm being proper. He serves our country as a pilot in the Air National Guard full-time with 2 additional streams of income, one through short-term vacation rental properties, and a second by serving as a realtor. Today, Karl joins us to discuss how he helps his real estate clients build wealth through house hacking, a wealth building tactic that is sometimes overlooked and misunderstood. Welcome, Karl.
Wow, thank you. Thank you guys for having me, making me feel like a celebrity with that kind of introduction.
Well, we're
really excited to be here with you guys. So this is my first podcast. I'm pumped to talk house hacking and real estate.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. So lots of WealthSaver listeners aren't aware of what this is, but we see it on with influencers and on social media. People have talked about this tactic called house hacking. So what is house hacking?
Sure. Yeah, so you're right. Bigger Pockets, especially here in the last 5 to 10 years, has blown up this phrase called house hacking. And they've coined a lot of terms between, that and Burr, done a great job of really marketing just this concept that's actually been around for like ever. House hacking at its very root is having a roommate. That's all it is. In the 90s and 80s, we used to grow up, go to college, and you'd go to the city, you'd rent an apartment, but instead of renting with 1 bedroom, you'd rent with 2 or 3, and you'd rent out the other bedrooms to make your rent cheaper. That allowed you to have a bigger, nicer place to live. And so lately, they've just coined that as house hacking. So house hacking is buying a house with a few bedrooms and renting out those rooms to make your living costs free or less, or even being able to make a profit. People do it with duplexes, triplexes, but at the very most simple way of doing it is buying a single family home and renting out the rooms.
So why wasn't that popular, or hasn't that been popular for a while? Like, why is
it
just now?
I think it's been popular. I just don't think we had social media to tell everybody we were doing it. I honestly think, and if you go to a city like New York City, if you work as a waiter or in the service industry in big cities, there isn't the money to have these big, nice apartments. When you watch shows on TV, $20-30 million New York apartments that are, all of 1 bedroom. How do you afford that? So the way to afford housing becomes either rent from somebody or buy an apartment and have multiple roommates that share with you, or rent the apartment and then split the rent between people. I think now that we have social media and podcasts, people are talking about it. And especially in the last couple of years, real estate's become so big in terms of investing. Once you coin a name to it that sounds a lot better than just having a roommate, build it and people will come, right? So give it a cool name and put it all over social media. And once somebody grabs on and it goes viral, off you go.
So question, you mentioned investing, and a little bit, I know your background from investing. How did you transition from just basic investing, stock market, into real estate?
Sure. So I've always had this kind of feeling that I wanted to get into real estate. You read books, and all the millionaires in the world seem to have some sort of real estate investments, whether it's commercial, apartment complexes, whatever. So I knew I wanted to be a landlord because those were all the people that had money when you're growing up. So a few years ago, I finally said, hey, finally kind of in a place in life, not moving around every 12 months for the military. It's time to settle down. and think towards the future. How do we get into a rental property? So for 6 or 7 months, I listened to every podcast I could. I read every book I could. I basically learned the language of real estate, which I think is very important. You have to be able to speak real estate before you can dive in. That way you understand what words mean, how the math works, simple things like how to vet a tenant, just the general business, because what you're doing is opening a business. At the end of that 6 to 8 months, ironically, I had shoulder surgery and I was told I had to be out of work for 4 weeks straight, sitting on the couch in a sling. So for 4 weeks straight, I sat on Bigger Pockets and vetted my team and ended up meeting my real estate agent, Holly, who is now my business partner. And we used the time after surgery to find the property and decide exactly how we were going to get into real estate, what method was right for us, which ended up being short-term vacation rentals. And yeah, 3 years later, we now have 2 vacation rentals, extremely successful down on the beach in Galveston. And then even more recently, I've started actually another way of investing in real estate, which is I'm now lending money out to house flippers at interest. So 100% passive, they get to have my money and flip a house with it. I don't have to do any of the work. And at the end of the 6 or the 12 months, they're going to give me a percentage of my money back on top of what I gave them, just to keep that money always working for me.
To stay on to what we like, I guess the house hacking topic, what is it specifically about that? The concept that you like so much?
Sure. The reason I love house hacking, especially as a real estate agent, is I get to work with young adults, even in college, that have a chance to buy a property and be homeowners at an extremely young age. I think that's extremely important. And when you go to the basics of investing, they always say time is your best friend. The longer you have, the more exponential your growth can be. House hacking provides an opportunity for these 20, 21, 22-year-olds to come out of college, buy a house at a low down payment, potentially need a cosigner, which is fine, and live for free. And while they're living for free at these, in their home, they also have these entry-level jobs where they're maybe not making a ton of money yet. But if you're living for free, all the money you would be paying on housing, you can now put towards other things, whether it's reinvesting for a second house, whether it's other things in your life by being able to buy a car. It's just making living cheaper for you to help you start out on the right foot a lot earlier in life. And the fact that we have the opportunity to help young adults get into investing and build wealth from such a young age, I think is extremely powerful. Example I have is I actually have a client who closed on his first house. We're about 3 weeks ago at this point, 21-year-old. He
Nice.
closed on a house 5% down with a conventional loan. And the goal is in the next 2 years, he'll buy a second house. And by the age of 30, he'll easily have 4 or 5 homes, 4 of them being rental properties, 1 being the one he lives in.
So you mentioned something really interesting. Obviously most Americans hear the concepts, okay, you need to have 20% to put down on a home.
Sure.
You want to avoid the PMI or the privatized mortgage insurance. But you just mentioned here, like 5% down, which even in a conventional will have PMI.
Yes. And PMI, if it's my house, I don't want to pay for it. But if somebody else is paying the PMI for me, does it really matter? And honestly, for me, it doesn't. If I'm able to get an investor, or as an investor, I'm able to get at a house at 5% down. So on a $200,000 house, you're at $10,000 in closing costs. If I'm able to do that, and other people are going to pay the PMI for me while they're renting out my rooms, the PMI really doesn't hurt. And oh, by the way, if you use a conventional loan, the PMI is going to go away at 22% equity. So as that house grows in equity, we're going to see inflation over the next few years and grows in value, and your equity gains, that PMI is eventually going to go away. Unlike the FHA loan, in the FHA loan, which is 3.5% down, even better, you will never get rid of that extra insurance payment. So I always tell people go conventional, so that you don't have to do the refinance at the end of the year or two. But yeah, if somebody else is paying it for me, honestly, and the numbers run, it doesn't matter to me.
Smart. Now, Karl, you're making a lot of great points. So, on our first episode, we had our guest Bob, who is actually a retired Marine. He talked about house hacking as while he was a junior Marine. Can you walk us through the process, kind of what you did for the client you just mentioned? If a WealthSaver investor comes to you, wants to get into house hacking, they purchase a home, like what's that process look like for your client?
Sure. Yeah, I actually listened to that episode. And when he started talking about having roommates, I got extremely nervous that I was going to have no good secrets to give you guys when I got on. I was like, oh man, this is it. I'm never getting on their podcast. But it was great. No, it's proof is in the pudding, right? And he called it having a roommate instead of house hacking, right? So two different terms. It's the exact same concept, and it's been working for years. But back to your question, if somebody comes to me, the first step is you got to have your finances in order. You don't have to be rich to have a house, but you don't want to have lots and lots of unnecessary debt. Credit card debt lenders aren't going to love. Big car payments. You need to take a look at your debt to income ratio and make sure that it's realistic. I recommend calling a lender and going through the numbers with them. Lenders want your business. They get paid by getting you a deal, right? So it is incentive to them when you call them for them to work with you if you're going to get a deal at the end of it, right? And there's incentive for them to find you a deal and shop your deal around. So the first thing is you have to get pre-approved. Before we show anybody homes, we want you to be pre-approved. We want a realistic look on what you can afford and what a lender is going to approve you for. Once we get that pre-approval with a number in hand, we're going to go to the fun part, which is house shopping. We're going to go out and start looking for homes that make sense for house hacking. One of the things I point out to clients is when we go out looking for homes for house hacking, you're not looking for your dream home. You're looking for a functional home. We're looking for a home that makes sense to have people renting out rooms. Now, in a duplex, that's pretty easy because I'm going to live in one side and they're going to live in the other. But in a single family home, if I buy a 5-bedroom house with only 1 bathroom, now we have 5 people all trying to get in the bathroom at once. It's not functional. And then when you go to getting reviews and needing more business, it's probably going to hurt. So we're looking for the maximum amount of bedrooms possible. So the deal we just did was a 5-bedroom house, and then you need multiple bathrooms. You need them conveniently located. And then depending on, if you're able to rent out the master bedroom with a private bathroom, now you can even charge more money. We look at things like that. If there are private spaces in the home, if there's places we could add a bathroom into a bedroom. If you have big bedrooms, we're looking for functionality of the house as opposed to really minute, oh my gosh, this yard is perfect, I love the pool kind of details. We want a functional house that's going to rent out well for the rest of your investing career. Once we find that house, it's normal home buying. We are putting in an offer, negotiating, working with the lender to close the deal. And then after you close the deal, game on. You are the landlord. You're getting the house ready to rent out, and you're choosing exactly how you want to do it. Then there's tons of ways you can do house hacking in terms of how you want to rent. Airbnb and VRBO and the short-term rentals make sense depending on where you live. The last house we did was actually up close to Hobby Airport. So one of my recommendations was potentially opening it up to pilots and flight attendants as a crash pad. And you'd be a live-in landlord that takes care of the space and takes care of the things for them while you're gone. Long-term investing makes sense. I even recommend if you have multiple bedrooms to rent out, use a different bedroom for different purposes. So one might be an Airbnb, one might be a long-term, and now you have diversification in the income you have coming in, which will protect you in the long run, hopefully, if there are things like COVID that just happen where people aren't renting as much or traveling as much. So there's a lot of ways to skin the cat in that arena. And then after that, you start renting out the rooms. It's all about property management, keeping the property up to date, keeping it clean, and keeping your guests as happy as possible so they'll recommend your property to others.
10 and 2, man. 10 and 2. And for people wondering what that is, just remember you're looking at a 10-year replacement time frame. So you need to be doing a review every 2 years of your property to make sure everything's intact. And 10 also refers to about 10% of your income should be going into a savings for replacement costs.
100%. And the nice thing about being that live-in landlord is you talk about the 2-year review. It's you can do an everyday review without even having to think about it because you're going to be constantly getting the feedback. So that will be a lot more seamless. The other thing I bring up with house hacking is you talk about setting 10% aside, which is perfect. you were going to make those replacements anyway if you live there by yourself. So now somebody else is paying for all those repairs for you.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Obviously there are going to be some highs and lows here. So what, in your experience, what have been some of the positives and maybe some of the less desirables?
Sure. So the positives is when this works perfect, you're living for free and maybe even making some profit. So any of that leftover cash flow is going towards hopefully house number 2. But at the very least, you are not paying rent or your own mortgage. So living for free is powerful. That $1,600 a month here in Houston for a $200,000 house, which is actually very cheap in the Houston area, is significant savings that you can be putting elsewhere, whether it's future investments, a future home, or just living expenses. The downside is you have to have roommates. You can't get around house hacking without having somebody live with you. And so you're going to give up your privacy. If you have a duplex, like I said earlier, they're going to live in the other side. Not that big of a deal. But if you're sharing rooms, you are going to give up a lot of privacy. And then there's the, what if I don't like somebody I just signed a lease with? You potentially you're stuck with them for a year. That's why I like Airbnb. If you don't like somebody, maybe they're there 3 or 4 days, you can kind of deal with it, right? But for a year, it's a significant investment in your time and energy and just mental health sometimes, depending on who your roommate is. But the key really is, once you open your door to others, you're now a landlord. You can't be emotionally attached to that house. You are running a business, and it's all about making the numbers work and getting profits so that you can invest. The other disadvantage is some of the finance. What you want to do is you want to be very upfront with your lenders with what you're doing, and being able to scale. So investing, the more exponentially we can do it, the faster, the more money we make, the earlier we retire, whatever your goals are. For house hacking, the majority of lenders are going to have a limit on how long you have to live in the home before you can move to home number 2. Commonly, I see that's about 12 months. So you're going to have to be in the home for 12 months, which is fine. Stay in the home for 12 months, save up money for house number 2, and then after 12 months, move on to the second home, and then start renting out that first home full time. And if you're able to do it every 12 months, in 10 years, you could have 10 houses. More realistically, I think it's probably going to be every 2 to 3 years. But as you start adding homes, so you get to home number 3, now you have 3 homes giving you cash flow. Your savings for home number 4, home number 5 come much more quickly than they would have in your first year. But the biggest downside is just that lack of privacy and having to be a landlord.
You mentioned earlier duplexes and single family homes. No, not every home is obviously going to be a single family home. There are condos. So can you talk a little bit why you lean more towards one over the other?
So part of going multifamily versus single family home is going to be market driven. South side of Houston here, League City, Friendswood, Webster, we don't have a lot of multifamily homes, so it's just not an option. You go down to Galveston, there's more multifamily homes, but in my opinion, maybe less of a market for the house hacking to work. I want to be up closer to Houston in a busier city. So it's a little bit of work with what you've got and make that work for your business plan if it's possible. Things like condos, I don't typically advise, and that's because of the HOA. HOAs are going to be a little bit more strict on what you can and can't do in terms of rentals, which brings up another point because even single family home HOAs may have issues. So you want to make sure you understand all the rules when you're getting into the property. But for where we are here in Houston, single family homes just work because that's what we have.
Perfect. Now that like you've mentioned before, there's going to be a chance for individuals to build the number of homes that they have in their repertoire. Yep. Do they all keep them in their name?
That's a great question. If you go onto any podcast, any blog, it is argued about for days. Those are some of the most popular discussions out on social media. If it's just a couple homes, I don't see issue with it. I always say the reason you do it is 100% liability. There are these things called umbrella insurance policies that you can go to your insurance agent and talk about. They'll protect you for a lot of money and will help out. But to comment, I want to get an LLC people run to. There are loopholes in that too. So 100% that's a discussion for CPA and your insurance agents. I don't want to be the one that says yay or nay. Personally, the reason we went LLC on one of our properties was because we had a partnership structure and we wanted to make sure that partnership structure made sense and was well defined. But there are insurance policies that can do the same job as an LLC. And then a lot of people mention LLCs for tax savings. You don't actually need the LLC in real estate for tax savings. You can do that as a sole proprietorship. So 100% for tax savings, I would say no. And really just for a couple of houses, you don't have enough money or equity for people to come after where it makes sense, right? But 100%, that is a great conversation to have day one with your CPA to get their opinion.
So, Karl, with today's seller's market, would you still say that house hacking is a good way to invest? Why or why not?
Right now, I think with the seller's market, especially as somebody young doing a first-time home buyer kind of purchase, I think it's perfect. Properties are selling for record numbers. I've seen a little bit of a cool down, and I'd say little bit of a cool down. We have homes going like 4 days on the market instead of 1 day. But that's a drastic change in terms of what we've seen over the last 6 to 8 months. So there's signs of things slowing down a little bit, and there's a number of factors for that. But interest rates are low for first-time home buyers. They're still hovering right about 3%. And the fact that when you get into that home, even if you only rent out one of your rooms, you're still making money back that you wouldn't be paying in rent. So, on the last deal we just did, for example, to give you guys some insight, the home was purchased at $212,000. It was a 5-bedroom, 2-bath home. It needed a little bit of work, but that's okay because we're going to force some equity into it. We're going to force appreciate that home. We estimated about a 25% cash on cash return at the end of the year, assuming he gets all 4 of the extra rooms rented out. So that was about $3,900 in cash flow his first year. So that's profit on top of. So now he's living for free. He's paying 0 rent and $3,900 a year in profit. And if you go one step farther and add in the money that he's saving, so add another, call it $800 to $1,000 a month, you're now looking at something close to $10,600 in cash flow a year that he wouldn't have been paying, which is significant on the percentage side. So I think it's a great time to house hack. I think it's a great time to get into properties. There's appreciation to be made over the next 10 years. Keep in mind, real estate investing is a long game. So you buy the house now and you rent out 1 room year 1, maybe 2 year 2, it gets better, but the value of the home is also growing. So a $200,000 home now in 10 years may sell for $250,000, $300,000. You're making money that way too. And you're getting tax savings as a young adult. The IRS is very, very forgiving to real estate owners, especially when you're a landlord. So there's lots of money to be saved that way. So I think it's a great time to house hack. There are deals everywhere. If it wasn't a great time, people wouldn't be buying.
Good point. So question we ask all of our guests: what does the term WealthSaver mean to you?
Sure. So yeah, I think for me, the term WealthSaver is the everyday actions you're taking to get closer to whatever that final goal is of financial freedom. Q and I were talking before the podcast about how it's to sit on the beach and have, running none of our businesses and just collecting the check at the end of the month, retiring early. It's every action you do towards that. Not everybody has 10, 20, 30, $50,000 to put down on a home. But just because you don't have the money yet doesn't mean there's not steps you can take to get that money, whether it's creating a budget, reading a book, listening to a podcast like this one to learn ways to get yourself closer to that step of financial freedom. Day one of being in investing, you're not going to go out and buy a house. You have to learn how to buy the house first. So being a wealth saver is taking that action and putting those steps in place to get yourself to your goal.
Karl, if there are listeners who want to get in contact with you,
yes,
what is a great way that they can reach you?
So I'm on Instagram. The tag is Real Estate Investing Texas. Also on YouTube with the same channel name. You can look me up on Facebook. I'm the only Karl McGarvey realtor on Facebook. And then the easiest way, honestly, is my email, which is karlrmcgarvey@gmail.com. And I respond to every single email I get, no matter what the question is. I love talking real estate, even if it's just back and forth banter about housing markets and when the crash is or isn't coming and stuff like that. I will answer every single email I get every day.
Thank you. Yeah, Karl, it's been a pleasure and very informative. I know we had a lot of listener questions come in specifically about housing. So this is going to be one of those episodes I think we're going to get a lot of feedback from too.
Awesome.
But all of my wealth savers out there, guys, if you have any questions or topics you want us to cover, we listen. We go out there and find those people to interview. So keep those questions coming, and we'll look forward to hearing from you guys soon as we prepare for our next episode.
Thank you so much, Karl.
Yeah, no, I thank you guys for having me. This has been fun.
Like what you heard? Make sure you rate us and subscribe to Tailored WealthSaver Podcast.
If you have podcast ideas or topics you'd like for us to cover, email us at podcast@tailoredwealthsaver.com.